Well, hi there. This week we're talking about peace, and there's an article called Talk Yourself Out of a Slump, which I wanted to share with you. Begins with the question, are you struggling with discouragement right now? Well, this week we're talking about peace, and there's no peace when, we give ourselves negative talk, where things have plateaued and we feel responsible, or we've lost momentum. Where budgets are tight and the future is unclear. These are the things that we live with at the moment. 1 Peter 5:7 says, cast all your anxiety on him, on Jesus, because he cares for you. Well, that's where we eventually want to get, but let's move to our starting point. How do you talk yourself out of a slump? Well, I guess I'd have to say that community plays a huge role in a healthy mental outlook. We need people to speak to us. We can be honest with them, and they'll talk to us in our discouragement and encourage us. But there are 3 P's of discouragement, and it begins with isolation and self-pity. Dr. Henry Cloud says that we often talk ourselves into a learned helplessness when we're discouraged. And perhaps the beginning place is that we take things personally. In leadership, as in many situations in life, we hear bad news and it's serious, but often we take that bad news personally. It's what happens when we look at the numbers that don't meet the targets. We say that's bad, and it is. But what we tend to sometimes do with that is to say, well, therefore, I'm a bad person. I'm a failure in this area. Taking responsibility, of course, is a great thing. But shaming and blaming ourselves rarely does anybody any good. It's not constructive. And that leads to the second P, is that we have a pervasive attitude. So maybe you missed a target, lost a key staff member, or, just blew something that you were trying to do. But rather than focus on the specific issue, we tend to say that the problem is about us. Suddenly in our mind, we're not good at anything. And we find ourselves saying things like, everything I do is bad. And my home life is bad. Work is bad. I'm failing at everything, which of course is not the case. But that doesn't stop your mind from going there. And once it goes there, it quickly finds its way to the third P, which is permanent. So not only have you convinced yourself that you don't have what it takes and that you're bad at everything, and now you start telling yourself that your failure is permanent. And it's just never going to get better. Well, not with your lack of talent anyway. But this is a thought pattern that is so negative, and it leads to discouragement and defeat. But you know that all of that is a lie. You do know that, don't you? And it can show up anywhere. It can show up in your work, it can show up in your marriage, it can show up in your parenting. Catastrophizing rarely leads to a good place. Recognize that this pattern is one of the first keys to break it. Firstly, remind yourselves that none of this is true. You're not nearly as good as you think you are on your good days, but you're not nearly as bad as you think you are on your bad days either. Second, you're certainly not terrible at everything. That is just ridiculous. And thirdly, remind yourself that this is not permanent. You will recover, you will do better. So focus on what you can control, not on what you can't control. Henry Cloud points out that leaders who allow the 3 P's to dominate their thoughts suffer needlessly. You've more options than you think you have available. Henry Cloud suggests, take a sheet of paper and write 1 column of everything that you can't control that's affecting you. Today, that would be things like a pandemic and our obligations to the state, the orders that they've made, or the economy, or people choosing to leave, or, we can't control other people. We can't control the government or the circumstances that we live in. But then he says make a second column and write down all the things that you can control. We can control what we're going to do next week. We can control whether we pick up the phone and speak to someone, or whether we remain isolated from them. We can choose to invite a new staff member to a meeting to welcome them, or give them a project. In other words, focus on what you can do, not on what you can't do. And a final strategy is to redirect your emotions. It's not that hard for me to get stuck in my negative feelings or to throw a pity party. When I find myself moving in that direction, I remind myself, focus on what you know is true, not on what you're feeling in the moment. And that brings us to our verse for today. Cast all your anxiety on him because he cares for you. That's the place that we need to take our mind and discipline ourselves. And when we do that, that's when we might find peace, not when we listen to these voices in our head. Bye for now.